Hello, dear friends. Welcome back once again at Lit eCity, the YouTube channel that tries to bring you relevant and important material related with exams like NTA NET. Dear friends, in our series Key Terms of Cultural Studies, I have bring you some more important terms and hoping that they will help you in your coming examination. So let's start our today's video with our first term, that is critical discourse analysis. Dear friends, this term was first proposed by Norman Fairclough, and it is critical discourse analysis, or CDA, is actually a way of examining the use of language functions in different communities and to discover their correlation with the society. So basically it is related with linguistics, and this particular analysis, this particular methodology tries to find relationship between language use of languages and social atmosphere. This particular analysis is also known as textually oriented discourse analysis, or TODA, and we can say that it is a social theory of discourse which sees the use of language as a form of social practice. You may have heard and read about these particular terms, that language is also a form of social practice. Now, the basic questions which any critical discourse analysis asks are like, if we are determined by our social discourse, then who determines and what determines this discourse? What are the rules, codes, ideologies that dictate the way we engage in a discourse, that is, how we speak, how we behave, interact, and perceive particular language and communication? If discourse refers to a particular view of an event, now then who creates that view? So these are some questions related with this particular analysis. The main interest of CDA is to find the connection. This is most important thing. It tries to find the connection between discourse and power, and how certain types of ways of thinking are treated as normal, valid, authentic, natural. These basically why particular system of thinking are considered to be true. Fairclough's Discourse and Social Change. It is an important book in this context because he presented his methodology for CDA, and his model of CDA has three interrelated processes which are associated with three dimensions of discourse. So the first one is object of analysis. It includes all kind of verbal and visual, or we can say audio visual texts. The second one is process of production, how particular discourse is produced, either by writing, speaking, reading, listening, viewing, and by all human subjects. And third one is also very important. It is the socio-historical conditions that govern all these processes. They are considered, taken into account into this particular discourse analysis. According to Fairclough, each of these dimensions require a different kind of analysis. So when we talk about text analysis, we do the description part and try to explain, and when it is about the process of production of particular discourse, then we try to interpret it, and then when we talk about socio-linguistic side of the discourse, then we present an explanation. So these are three kind of we can say treatment given to three different dimensions. In this diagram you can also understand it is later elaborated by with the model of Fairclough. Text which may be written or spoken, then we have description of generation of various genres, types, categories. interaction, it is on the second level. Then how we produce this particular text and how we receive this particular text, all these kind of interpretation. And the outside circle, the most outside circle is that of context, all kind of socio-cultural, economic, political and environmental conditions of production and interpretation. These are explained. Now we come to a very important term, dear friends, that is episteme. And episteme is originally a Greek philosophical concept, and it meant to know or to understand, and it was later used by Michel Foucault in his book The Order of Things to refer to unconscious structure that underlie our production of scientific knowledge at a particular time and place. So this unconscious structure which gives order to particular human system, that is a particular episteme. Now, Plato also discusses the concept of episteme, and he uses this term in the context to mean a statement which conveys absolute certainty. It means episteme has truth with it, while he gives the contrasting term doxa, which refers to belief, opinion, personal opinion. So in episteme and doxa, episteme holds more value because it relates to absolute certainty. Foucault, on the other hand, describes episteme as a sort of field or a space of knowledge within which all competing theories that may be opposing to each other and concepts exist and are evaluated. According to this particular episteme, certain theories are given value and hold to be true, while other particular theories and concepts are rejected as false. So we can say, in other words, an episteme is the body of ideas that determine the knowledge that is intellectually certain, intellectually true, intellectually acceptable at a given time. Now, when a particular time, era, epoch changes, the episteme also changes. In any given culture and at any given moment, there is only one dominant episteme that decides the conditions of possibility of knowledge. Thus, episteme provides us with a sense of order which is otherwise not possible. In fact, I would like to add here what Foucault has done. He studies Argentinian writers, Borges, who basically referred to a Chinese encyclopedia about taxonomy of animals, and how Borges basically divided these animals. They were completely disordered kind of taxonomy. You cannot categorize with that because there is no episteme ordering this particular structure. These conditions can be in form of rules in a theory, or they may be silently observed in a particular type of practice. Foucault then analyzes the history of mankind and points out there have been three major epistemes and related three great epochs. First, there was Renaissance up to 1650, then the classical period up to the end of the 18th century, and the modern up to the present, but which according to Foucault is overrun and is also about to end. Here in this particular diagram you can understand pre-classical, it is the end of the 16th century, classical which is 17th and 18th century, and modern from the end of 18th century to today. There was general character was that of similitude, and the object of knowledge is to understand the laws of God. Then we have age of representation. We have to understand things with relation to nature. Then it is age of history, which is basically explained with the help of man. And mode of knowledge in pre-classical era was interpretation of signs, or we can say omens and different signals sent by God. During classical era, it was representation and language is constructed through these signs, and in modern era, interpretation of signs through man. A very important term is communicative competence, which is coined and developed by Dale Hymes, an American linguist, who described that communicative competence is the knowledge that speakers and listeners have in order to communicate in different social contexts in proper manner. Now, Hymes developed the concept of communicative competence in reaction, as we can say, a complement to Noam Chomsky's famous concept of linguistic competence. Chomsky assumed that competence is the knowledge shared by all native speakers. They all have, who speak and write fluently, they have this linguistic competence. Hymes, with his ethnographic research, concluded that even in all these individual speakers, there were variations. So while Chomsky considered only knowledge of formal linguistic structures as the base of competence, Hymes argues that competence demands knowledge of patterns of use. It is not only what, it is only how, where, why, and what. So, Hymes describes his model of communicative competence in these words. We have then to account for the fact a normal child acquires knowledge of sentences not only as grammatical, that is the model of Chomsky, but also what is appropriate to speak. When it is appropriate to speak, he or she acquires competence. When to speak, when not, what to talk about, with whom, when, where, what manner. All these qualities, all these competence are also acquired by children when they are growing up. This competence is integral with attitudes, values, motivations concerning language, features, use, and integral with competence for and attitude towards interrelation of language with other code of communicative conduct, like we can say habit, like society, culture, religion, caste. All these things matter. So this is what a communicative competence means. So a language user needs to use the language not only correctly, that is linguistic competence, but appropriately, that is communicative competence. Thus, Hymes brought socio-linguistic perspective into Chomsky's linguistic view of competence. Actually, the communicative competence is composed of four interrelated types of competence. Linguistic, about which Chomsky has already talked about, understanding and having command over vocab, language conventions like grammar and syntax. Then we also need strategic competence, which is the plan and assessment of the effectiveness of communication, whether this communication would be fruitful or not. Then we have social linguistic competence, that is social rules of language, politeness, directness, or we can say symbolical, indirect, figures of speech, non-verbal behavior, cultural references like use of idioms, expression, and we can say local curses. All these things come into the social linguistic competence. And then last one is discourse, understanding how ideas are connected through patterns of organization, conjunction, transition words, etc. A very important and a recent development in feminist cultural study is the concept of glass ceiling. Dear friends, it is a phrase coined during a conference in 1978 by Merlin Lardin, an American management consultant, and she used this metaphor to describe an invisible upper limit in organization, in institutes, in business enterprises, above which it becomes almost impossible for women to rise in the ranks. So you can see this particular diagram. It is, we can say, the ladder of promotion. A woman thinks she is progressing like her male counterparts, but then she hits the ceiling above which she cannot go, but her male counterparts are easily there. The metaphor of glass is used to indicate that a woman may not be aware of the existence because it is made of glass, so it is transparent until she hits it. So it is not an explicit practice of discrimination, but particular policies of company like compulsory working for night hours or many other kind of dress code in which women are not comfortable, and attitudes like gender roles, a particular work that cannot be done by a woman, gender bias and stereotypes. All these we can say create this barrier. Jasmine Babers, another American we can say scholar, she coined the term concrete ceiling in 2016 to describe the tougher hurdles of women of color face in getting success in their careers, because they are doubly exploited. They are women and they are women of color, so it is not just glass ceiling which can be broken, but rather concrete ceiling. An interesting related term was coined in 1992 by Christine Williams, the glass escalator, in her book Still a Man's World. It refers to man who enters female dominated fields and accelerate into higher positions. Okay friends, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed these lessons and are now able to better understand these critically important terms. Please go through these other materials also, that will be helpful in your exams. Keep watching, keep supporting. Thank you friends.